So yeah, well, it's 6:36. I'm going to go ahead and start this meeting. Thank you to all of you who have shown up. This may end up being a candidate discussion about how things are going, but I did want to introduce each of the candidates briefly here, just so that they can say who they are, what they're running for, and at this point a little bit about maybe why they're running. And I'll start with Pam Marsh. Oh, you got your cup up.
It's okay. So this is a candidate's hint. Now that we live in the Zoom world, when you make your candidate's coffee cup, put your logo on the outside, not just this is my Jeff Merkley cup. And I could have been advertising Jeff Merkley for 6 months on every Zoom call that I'm on.
Good point.
Well, it's great to be here with everybody. I think a sense of normalcy is going to be hard to come by for a very, very long time, but we have to make some stabs at carrying on with regular life. I know I got a text message from Future PAC, which is the House campaign operation today, asking me to do something. And I had to say, I cannot even deal with this now. You do not understand what's happening in my community. And of course they were very understanding. So that's the flip side of looking for normalcy, is really understanding that our agendas have completely shifted. What we were doing a week ago is now not what we are doing today. And as we look forward, the months ahead are going to be filled with activities and jobs and undertakings that we couldn't imagine a week ago. So I think that's part of the being kind to ourselves, is also understanding that so one step at a time, do the work that's ahead of us. As we look toward, so let me introduce myself for those of you who I don't know, but that's hardly anybody. I'm Pam Marsh. I'm running for re-election for a third term as the House representative from District 5. District 5 starts at the Klamath County, Jackson County line up in the Green Springs, includes the Green Springs, Ashland, Talent, Phoenix, a little corner of Medford as you head out toward Jacksonville and mid-Jacksonville and the Applegate, or at least most of the Applegate. So the area of devastation from this week is entirely within my district, primarily, of course, Talent and Phoenix, a little bit of areas that, while they don't sit in the community of Ashland, identify with Ashland as part of it and sit in the county. This has been a year when our agendas have shifted dramatically from where they might have been. I left Salem in the short session on March 6th. We knew that COVID was a thing, it was starting to unroll. We had no idea what it would become. About 2 weeks later, on March 23rd, the governor declared the first stay home, stay at healthy order. And since then, my life, like I'm sure many of yours, has been a cavalcade of Zoom meetings, web meetings, team meetings, Google meetings, calls. We thought that responding to and managing the pandemic took all of our time. And then we had the murder of George Floyd in May, and we all joined the national introspection that occurred as a result of that activity and the months of protests that we've seen since then, as we all start to come together and grapple with what really is a legacy of racism that's lasted in this country for 400 years. And then we thought that would change everything moving forward, and indeed it would. And then a week ago, we had the fire event that we're all a part of now. We are still doing the reckoning on the ground. FEMA has approved the first round of emergency response, but to be clear, that's just the first round. That allows us to get money for firefighting, for search and rescue, for shelter costs, for immediate response, essentially. Tomorrow, the governor will submit a request for the next layer of FEMA support, which could open the door to individual support. And I know people are really looking toward that. So I hope we move smoothly toward that. And even though we haven't counted the doors, we know the destruction is tremendous. As I've toured the area of Highway 99 a couple of times now, and we know what was on the ground just in terms of mobile home parks. And if you look at that data, the loss is more than a dozen manufactured home parks containing, I'm going to say 1,500 housing units at a minimum. The number will be bigger than that when you add in RV parks that were tucked here and there that were not on the state record. And that is before you ever get to counting apartment losses and stick and mortar home losses. And then there are the businesses like Terrie's that start just below the Valley View exit in Ashland and continue along Highway 99 for much of the Talent County and Phoenix frontage. It's not everything. When you get in there, you'll see there's a very unpredictable pattern to it, but it's a whole lot of destruction, absolutely. And those are the small businesses that are all a part of our community and the business owners like Terrie and her family that we've treasured for many years. So now we have dealing with the immediate catastrophe, trying to figure out how we are going to house what is literally thousands of people who have now been displaced from our communities, and taking on the subject of how we rebuild. I think the good news is that there are already people who are thinking about that. I was texting people I know in the manufactured housing world on Wednesday saying, we're gonna have to build some new manufactured housing units here. We're starting to strategize around how to keep some of that housing in the affordability realm that we so appreciate when it's been in the hands of manufactured housing parks. And we've got to figure out how to rebuild the business community that's at the heart of our communities and that was lost from both Talent and Phoenix. So as we head, I am now in the context of all of this running for re-election, and I hope that won't turn out to be a very big undertaking, because what we really need to do is immerse ourselves as much as possible in recovery and prepare for the legislative session to come next year, where I think you will see in priorities a budget that has been devastated before we ever got to wildfire. We were looking at perhaps a $4 billion gap in next year's budget. We were looking at the areas in which COVID has really had an impact in terms of our healthcare system and our revival of our local economies. We were looking at how we start to figure equity in as a primary motivating factor into every decision and budget choice that we make, because we now understand that we have a whole lot of racism to make up for, and we have to do that by being very conscious and intentional about our decisions. And wildfire and wildfire response will be at the top of that priority list, and must be. And it's interesting, we did a lot of wildfire work in the last couple of years, and some of my colleagues have called me and said, what forest restoration could we have passed that would have negated what you had happen in my community? And the answer, of course, is nothing, because we didn't have a single acre of forest burn as part of this. What we've experienced is an urban wildfire that is really the results of multiple weird factors coming together, and absolutely an indication of climate change. So there are many significant agendas ahead, and I hope I get reelected so that I can try and work with all of you as we join together and take our community to another place.
Thank you, Pam. I will say that out of all the elected officials I've been tracking in the last week, you have been doing a tremendous amount of work and some really good communication for those of us that were trying to track what was happening. So really appreciative of that. So,
Thank you.
and we're all voting for you, so you have all our votes.
Okay, thank you.
Alberto, introduce yourself, please.
And likewise, Terrie.
Thanks.
I'm Alberto Enriquez. I'm running for House District 6 in Medford. And I agree that the agenda has shifted a lot throughout the year, and especially as we've had what can only be called a madman in the White House, who is continually trying to jerk out the agenda out from other people by causing needless upsets and that have nothing to do with solving the very real problems that we're facing. And I started out making my campaign about affordable housing, living wage jobs, healthcare for everybody, and oh yeah, this one other thing, climate action now. And my opponent walked out of the legislature to block any action from happening on climate. You would think that we'd be at an end of denial at this point, but we're not. I was just looking at the governor's YouTube from today, and there's a long string of lunatic commentary, which basically says this is all about not thinning the woods, or maybe not raking the leaves. I don't know, but it's somehow all her fault. And this is a woman who, without any doubt, has saved thousands of lives in Oregon. We know that because of the shutdown and the recommendation for masking and social distancing, that Oregon is in far better shape. And this is something I keep repeating, is that science and, truth are very good guides to public policy. And what we've seen is a constant appeal to irrationality and to demonizing other people. And that has to stop. That's the first thing that has to stop, is we have to calm down and get people to see that common sense, science, decency, these things, truth still matter. We're not in a post-truth environment. I'm quite sure people were lying their heads off during the Neolithic, but it didn't make such a big difference. But when you lie about climate change, it makes a terrible difference for my grandchild, for everybody else's grandchildren, and for all the grandchildren to come. So this got to stop. I do think that as we build back, there are things we can do that will honor our previous agendas and get the job done. As we put up mobile homes, perhaps we could also work with the Energy Trust of Oregon to make sure that instead of having trees right cheek by jowl with these, and in between these 20-foot space mobiles, that we have solar sheds like you've seen at the airport. Every one of these mobile homes should be producing more power than it consumes. That can happen. We do it at our house. We did it all last year. And there's no reason we shouldn't be able to use the state's bonding authority to cover that. Living wage jobs, same thing. All this solarization that I talk about, somebody's got to do it. It's not going to be me. I'm retired. But there can be thousands of jobs around the state for people who do quality work, like True South Solar. We're so glad they came to our house. And universal health care is so important now when people have so many needs. And we see that, La Clinica can swing into action and help. And why is that? It's because every dollar that we put into the Oregon Health Plan, we get $9 back from the Fed. And as I like to say, if you sat out in front of your property and could trade dimes for dollars, wouldn't you do that all day long? I would. And so that's good for Oregon, and it's good for the Rogue Valley, and we've got to keep pushing it. But definitely climate action now. And getting back to what Representative Marsh said about racial justice. I had one of my more surprising calls when I called up retired police chief Tim George, and I wanted to talk to him about the common sense proposals for better policing that were passed in the last legislature, and what further could we do. And he immediately had yet another proposal. And he said, those things are okay, but what you have to do first is make sure that the wrong people don't get in the job in the first place. And he said, almost every other state I can think of, California and Washington included, give lie detector tests for every police hire. And we don't. And that astonished him that we still don't. And he thinks that would make a tremendous difference. He says in California, they've seen a great deal of bad behavior disclosed during these pre-hiring lie detector tests. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Alberto. I'm going to skip over to Jerry Allen now. A few minutes to introduce yourself and talk about the.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Mhm.
Thank you for putting on this event. I'm Jerry Allen. I had a career as a social work supervisor, a hospital executive, a clinic founder, and an elected financial and pension trustee. Well, I'm retired. Now I'm running for the state senate. Why? Because in this time of crisis, and the crisis, just as we all just know what Alberto was just talking about, the crisis just got bigger. It got way bigger for our region in the last 5 days. And we need competent, truthful, cooperative leaders in our legislature who can bridge this partisan divide. There's a quote that says, change moves at the speed of trust. I love that. And that's what Alberto was just talking about. We have to calm down and get busy trying to do the work together. Certainly, we've got to stop this coronavirus. Anybody who's a virus denier, they got to get out of the way with that and get real here, because it's real. And what the governor has done is important. If we don't beat this virus, we can't rebuild the economy. It's as simple as that. We must do it. So that's crucial. And we all know that we got to rebuild the economy and do affordable housing and do a clean energy version of rebuilding back better. So you just add the dimension of all the people who've lost their homes just now, and all of the people who've lost their jobs or their businesses like Terrie and their livelihood. It got much, much bigger. And what it requires is us reaching across every divide, rich, poor, ethnic group, partisan divides, class divides, every divide we can think of. We got to reach across it and say, what we have together to do is more important than our differences. Let's focus on that. So I do want to mention one specific, and Alberto just touched on it very briefly, because voters are saying to me, are these just election slogans that you're saying? How do you plan to pay for rebuilding Oregon if you're elected? And I want to say this because I'm hoping more candidates will push this. My first and best idea is initiate infrastructure bonds. Some call them green bonds. Massachusetts is doing them right now. We got to get with it with that. I was chair of a pension plan investment committee for many years, and I developed working relationships with all of these investment companies in the East Coast, best in the United States. And I know that they will invest in infrastructure bonds, and their clients will invest in them, and the pension plans that they serve will invest in them. So why are they so important? Because they're safer than stocks, they are less volatile, and the pension plans will buy them. And those bonds can pay for rebuilding what we've got to rebuild in Oregon. They can pay for a big piece of it. And you pay it back over 30 years so it doesn't bust the budget to get the projects done. We can build green energy infrastructure. We can build this affordable housing that we need. We can address climate issues, put thousands of Oregonians back to work, and enlarge the property tax base with the value of all of that new housing. This is a big, big, big win across the board. So I want to say something, just, I don't want to take too long with this. What it means for this election right now. This is an absolutely crucial election in every district that is represented by the people who are here tonight. It's a watershed moment. If we don't get massive federal help, Representative Marsh was mentioning this, if we don't get massive federal help, next year will be a very ugly budgetary year. for our legislature with many cherished programs on the chopping block. And that's not even to mention all the things that we need to build and add on, and doing it in a fairer, more just way. The chopping block is merciless. So everything we want to accomplish depends on getting more seats in the Senate and in the House who are cooperators, seats filled with legislators who are willing to reach across and get it done together, who won't run and walk out of the job and run across the state line to try to do a Texas pocket veto. We need people who are willing to work. And that is true on every level of government. We have so much rebuilding to do. The people are depending on us. We can't let that crucial rebuilding be stymied by climate deniers, COVID-19 deniers, and walkout legislators. That isn't going to work. So I feel fired up about this. I guess you can hear that. We've got to get this done, and we're going to reach out to every single voter we can reach and say, look, would you please help us get this done? This is a generational opportunity. We've got to seize it, and we can do that, and we can help our people.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. We're going to move over to Hugh. And Hugh, help me pronounce your last name. Is it Palcic?
Sure.
Is that?
Yeah, bingo.
Okay,
Palcic.
awesome.
You nailed it.
All right.
That's great. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this tonight. I appreciate it greatly. Can you all hear me? I guess just a sound check. Good.
Yep.
Okay, great. Perfect. I echo the sentiments that have been made all the way through tonight by all the other candidates. I think they all speak with great passion, and I only hope that I could live up to what they have put forward so far. My name is Hugh Palcic, and I am running for Oregon Senate District 28. And I run, and it's interesting because I think for all of us as candidates, we did our own work, our own due diligence on our districts before we filed our paperwork. I know I did, traveled the district to learn the issues of the district and thought I had it dialed in. And almost from filing deadline day forward, you watch the playbook be thrown out the window, from COVID to, well, now we're dealing with wildfire as we are. That, you know, as Jerry just pointed out, there's great opportunity that's still there. And I think we have a sound foundation to work from as a state, but it's going to require all of us to come together. And I think it's going to require leadership. And I can say that was a key issue for me, the lack of leadership in my district. The district covers all of Klamath County, all Crook County, parts of Deschutes, southern Deschutes, most of Lake County, and a portion of Jackson County. So it's massive. It's New Jersey and Connecticut combined as far as land mass goes. So it's corner to corner, it's quite a travel. And the issues are big. And when I looked at the district, I saw a district that was initially performing quite below par. Out of 30 senatorial districts, it ranks at or near the bottom on all key indicators. At the time I filed, Klamath County actually had the highest unemployment rate. I'm sure you could throw that out the window right now as well. So I had three key issues that I started with, and they have shifted. And, you know, initially that I was looking at, obviously one, I wanted to tackle the unemployment issue in my district. I looked at infrastructure as a key. So, you know, as Jerry pointed out and several others tonight, infrastructure is a key component to that. It is an economic generator on its own. And what I mean by that is when I look at my rural district, the digital divide that exists is so important to close. We need to close that gap. And we learned through COVID and what's happening with our schools, our rural schools, distance learning is more than a challenge. We have greater than 50% of Lake County doesn't even have connectivity today. So these are challenges right now that can't be overcome in some cases. So I looked at infrastructure for renewable energy as well. I see our district as a launching pad for that. I think we're poised quite well to be a power broker into the future. And affordable housing was another key issue. And people really, especially those that I know from more urban settings, gee, housing is an issue in rural Oregon? Yes, indeed it is. So those were the three that I initially started out with. And as I guess as the football play breaks down and you start scrambling in the backfield to figure out what to do next, you stumble across things. For instance, again, rural schools and the need to actually prop up our rural schools. They're significantly underfunded, and I look at a plan that we need to move forward to reinvest in our rural schools. It can be done, and it needs to be done. So that got added as a fourth wing to this. But probably the most important piece that's missing that I see in my district, and perhaps in others out there as well, is that there's almost like this lack of the caring or leadership that exists. And I'll give a perfect case in point. My opponent has yet to acknowledge the fires. He had two recent tweets, one about Dr. Fauci and one about our governor with an overreach relative to masks. As you mentioned earlier, several of us have put together full pages for resources for people relative to the wildfires and how they could actually obtain help and assistance. That leadership is missing day in, day out in Salem for my district. And that's what compelled me to step forward and run for this race. I can also tell you the Tubbs fire that hit Coffey Park in Santa Rosa in 2017, I toured that afterwards and had a colleague that invited me down to look at it. And I was shocked by what I saw. And at that time, I was general manager for the community of Sun River, and we border 3 sides of national forest. So it's a tinderbox waiting around us on all sides. What shocked me was the home-to-home ignition that they were dealing with in Santa Rosa and Coffey Park, which is slightly different than a wildfire that you would have in a forest. And I think that coming out of that and seeing it, the after effects of it, seeing the lost pet locators that were put in place, which you wouldn't even think of right off the bat. There's so much that needs to be done after the fire is out. And it's going to require all of us to be working together. And I think that's the big piece for this. There's going to be a need for compassion as we move forward. And I think if we're at all at odds, and I'm saying this from red to blue, blue to red, you can pick the color. I think we have to throw that all out the window right now. We're Oregonians first, and we need to work together. So I offer that up. When we talk about reaching across the aisle, I think, in standard legislative terms, that certainly makes sense. But it's more than that now. It's deeper than that. This is all of us. So I thank you. I don't have more to say on that, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. We're going to move to my friend Mary Middleton. Mary and I took the Emerge class together at the end of last year, and both of us ended up running. So introduce yourself, Mary, and tell a little bit about why you're running.
Thanks, Terry. So my name's Mary Middleton. I'm running for Oregon State Representative District 4. District 4 is parts of Josephine County and Jackson County. I live in Grants Pass, so it includes the east side of Grants Pass, and then heads kind of hugs the I-5 corridor just past Central Point. So it includes all of those small communities in between Eagle Point, White City, Gold Hill, Rogue River. So it's a large region as House districts go, and a lot of small communities. You know, the largest community in it is Central Point. And, you know, I filed back in December, and I had no idea that we'd face, as this has been said already, you know, we'd face COVID and then a social crisis and then huge economic crisis. And now these wildfires raging through the region. And you just have to keep pace as best you can. I've been spending the last several days reaching out to, I work at the local community college. I don't speak on behalf of the community college, so I sometimes don't say the name, but you all know what it is. But, and I serve as the union leader. So I was speaking at a meeting on Saturday with other union leaders throughout the state. And some community colleges up by Salem are fearful that a lot of their buildings are going to burn down, that fire's just ravaging through there. And so, you know, it sort of feels like in 2020 that we don't know what our world looks like 45 days from now. And what is it? I'm going to look at my calendar. It is 48 days, 49 days until November 3rd, something like that. You know, I decided to run for office for many reasons. I've seen my opponent sort of not show up for the voters, not be there in times of need, be a very quiet representative. And yes, Alberto, 32 days until the ballots go out. That's right. That's not much time. And it's not a great time to reach out to voters, right? We're dealing with crises. And there's a lot of help available. And I appreciate all of the things that have been said. I think these fires are climate fires. And that's one of the things that I'm running on is the environment. And I'll echo what's been said before. I'm not going to walk out and say, you know, I'm not going to do my job today. I'm going to stay there and work across the aisle, work with everyone. I mean, there's so much work to be done. We were already looking at a bad budget year, and now it's even worse. So we just need representatives, I think, who are willing to do the hard work, who are willing to look at it and dig in and stay working on it. One of the organizations that I've worked with in the past, Our Family Farms, is doing a fundraiser for farm workers who were vastly displaced. Their homes were burned up in the fires, and OEA is having emergency relief funds for teachers. One of the stats that I saw was that approximately 30% of firefighters are college students. 30% of firefighters are college students. So how many students are still going to be fighting fires when school starts a week from today? And how are we going to accommodate those students so that they can continue to have their success? And how many teachers are without homes now? I was in a board meeting earlier today, emergency board meeting for the Southern Oregon Education Service District. And we lost a building in the fire in Phoenix. And what are we going to do with that? We got some decisions to make, a lot of hard choices there. And, you know, this crisis will push us at a time when we've already been pushed pretty hard. So as we come together, and I know that we can come together, there is so much more that binds us together than there is tearing us apart. And certainly fires like this bring us together, even though it's not a good way to come together, but I think it will bring us together. So I'm still in it to win it and gonna do the best I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Finally, we have Barbara Fontaine. You're muted, Barbara. Try again.
Hello.
Here you are.
Yeah. Well, Thanks for hosting this. I am so interested in hearing what everybody has been saying, and I'm right there with you. I'm Barbara Fontaine. I'm running for House District 55. This is about 80% by area of Hugh Palcic's Senate district. So it includes all of Crook County, southern Deschutes County, parts of Lake County and Klamath County and Jackson County. The week before last, I did a drive through the district down towards Lakeview and Klamath Falls and across towards Eagle Point, White City. And I saw thousands and thousands of homes and businesses tucked into the forest that looked like, you know, the areas that are burning right now. This isn't going to go away. So to back up just a little bit, I'm a retired forester from USDA Forest Service. I spent my entire career on the Ochoco National Forest. And in that brief human time span, I saw the effects of climate change on the forest and what was happening there with less snowpack, less water in the streams, less or hotter temperatures and longer fire seasons. And yet in Oregon, we're still building in the forest and we're packing it in. So we're going to have to use this moment to really step back and decide where we go in the future and how we rebuild in a smarter, more resilient way. And then also face the fact that we are so far into it. It's going to take everybody's work. And the reason I decided to run is because my opponent walked out instead of addressing any action on climate change. So I'm right the same place all of us are here. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. As I listen to everybody speak, I mean, you can hear the challenges that we're going to be dealing with in the coming year. I mean, we already had COVID to deal with, but now with the wildfires still raging across our state, I mean, it's almost breathtaking to think about what the challenges are going to be for our state legislature. I am running for county commissioner, a little different territory than the rest of them, just the confines of Jackson County. And as some of the people said earlier, I lost my business in this fire last week. And I'll just relate something that happened when I walked up to see it. I finally hiked in to see the ruins. And I got there and there were 2 fire trucks and a bunch of police officers that had all stationed themselves in our parking lot at DNS Harley-Davidson, or what was DNS Harley-Davidson. And anyway, I introduced myself to them, thanked them so much for fighting the fire and all their valiant efforts. And one of them looked at me and says, "Do you still want this job?" This is going to be hard work. And I said, I've never considered saying no. I mean, of course I want this job, and now more than ever. A lot of the time that I've spent running, people have asked me, what does the county do? Right? I understand I'm part of it. What does the county do? And one of the things I answer is that the county is an umbrella that is responsible for the overall health of Jackson County. And that is public health, that is environmental health, that is mental health. And it's exactly what happened in our county last week when a fire raged from Ashland all the way through the valley and to the other end of it. And just analyzing how the county responded or whether they were prepared enough is something that's fascinated me for the last 6 days. In the limited amount of power I have at my house, which is none, and living off a cell phone for the last 7 days, I've been trying to look into, you know, what kind of plan did they have and how much communication was happening for people. And it's really a fascinating question for me, because I spent a terrifying, probably the most terrifying night of my life with my parents, my daughter, in my living room trying to find information about this big red ball of fire that was coming up from Phoenix and Talent to my house in the foothills. And I couldn't find information. I could not find a source. I could not find any, I never got alerts. All this was playing against me. And the only thing I had was a son in Los Angeles who is tech savvy, who could find out what was happening. And so I found out, I've been asking on my Facebook page for people to contribute stories about, you know, what was your experience during the fire? Did you get alerts? I hope you did. I hope everyone got alerts. I hope everybody got out in time. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that no, they didn't get alerts, or they got alerts after their house was already on fire, or they didn't know they were supposed to sign up for alerts, or because they have a landline and the power went off, and all the modern telephones these days are electric and plugged into the wall, they didn't get the alert either. So what I'm feeling is that there are a tremendous amount of cracks in the plan that the county had, and we have paid a price for that. So it's more important to me now than ever that somebody be on this commission that can be a different voice than what is there now, because I feel at this time, after having Republicans for 10 straight years, that perhaps they've all kind of been agreeing and perhaps haven't had anyone actually questioning and asking, you know, could we do it better? What aren't we doing? What can we do to prevent this from happening next time? Or if it does happen, we have a better plan for alerts, communication, media. I don't know if anybody ever got an emergency broadcast message on your TVs, those of you that had power, but after getting all those tests for all those years, I'm wondering, you know, where was it on that night? As well as traffic. I know that people that were fleeing from Ashland and trying to get out of town were going right by my parents' house, for example, which was on fire in back pasture and was only going about 2 miles an hour with the fire raging behind us. So there's a lot of problems here that need to be evaluated and looked at and made sure that the county is ready for whatever comes next. It's not going to be easy. It's not, none of us, when elected, are going to have an easy job ahead of us in the next couple of years. But as everyone said, we have to do this together. I mean, if we don't work together and come up with these solutions, then we're just going to come to that other standstill and find that we don't solve everything before the next problem hits us. And I don't know what the next problem is after going through a pandemic and this election and a wildfire. And somebody said we should make the t-shirts that said, I survived 2020. I said, let's wait about 3 months, shall we? And then let's do it then. So I'd like with that to open it up. We have about, you know, some time left for people that have questions or thoughts about this issue, about the wildfire or other issues for our candidates here. If you want to go to the chat and post it there, or just raise your hand and we'll call on you, we'd be happy to do that. I think Hillary's all prepared. I'll open it up. Anybody?
Terry, I want to say that you had an excellent idea that we talked about the other day that's very important, is that there should not be an opt-out system, but an opt-in system, but an opt-out system as far as getting alerts. We have visitors, we have tourists, we have people who are not tech savvy or who don't listen to the news, so they don't learn about the county's programs.
I don't speak English.
Those alerts should go out to every cell phone in the valley, bar none.
Yep, exactly. That needs to happen. My daughter lives in DC, and she said when there's a hurricane coming down on DC, every cell phone within range gets a message that says that this is coming. It actually makes this bonk, bonk, bonk sound, and everybody's phone goes off at the same time saying there's an issue. And the stories that I'm collecting on Facebook are telling me people didn't know anything until suddenly there was a policeman banging on their front door, or their kid in Portland called and said, hey, I think the fire is near you. Or, you know, or a child in their neighborhood, you know, ran up on the sidewalk and said, you need to leave now. And that's not acceptable for me. I mean, I know this is a fast moving fire, and I know there's a lot of challenges, and I want to give all the kudos to the people that were trying to fight it. But somewhere in there, there was a communication snafu that we need to deal with.
And on that alert text, there should be a pointer to a map that is actually usable. When I went to the county for the map on the areas that they defined, it was so coarse that I couldn't tell what streets there were. I had to get another map and hold it up to look. You know, I had to get a physical map to see what areas were being declared evacuated.
On my cell phone, which is all we had in my living room, we tried to pull up the map, but you had to download it first before you could even enlarge it. And when you tried to enlarge it, you couldn't read the streets. So we're trying to figure, where are we on this map? You know, it was terrifying. Jerry.
In our area, we have a very active CERT team, Community Emergency Response Team, that is affiliated with our fire district. I know Ashland has one. They are in a number of communities. So whenever we have notifications that need to go out, particularly elderly people who maybe don't have a cell phone, you know, I know they're going to get it on their landline, but a lot of people don't seem to really get it and understand it, that, okay, you're getting the notice that you need to pack up and get out. Well, we have the whole emergency response team show up and fan out to all the different neighborhoods. And I'm just saying that I think that we need to do a better job as a whole region and a state of really developing and nurturing that kind of CERT team in each of our areas, so that we can have responders who are able to fan out and go to all the different neighborhoods and tell people, and you wear your uniform and you have your ID badge, so people know this is not just some crackpot who's coming here and say, okay, get out of your place. We're official. And I think that we need to do a much better job of that. And like Mary said, we need to be able to have the evacuation routes for people clearly identified, so that we can help people to get out. Because some of the loss of life is preventable. And I think we can do this. We can learn from our mistakes here and build it back better.
Right. Pam, any thoughts on the communication structure for alerts and things like that? Do you know? What do you know? You're muted.
I think we all have a lot to learn about how it has worked, how it did work. And honestly, what that communication structure exists of is not something that I know a whole lot about. I know I got alerts on my phone. They feel like they come sort of erratically. And I don't know that, you know, I think the kind of data that you're collecting on your Facebook request, you know, will start to help us understand, like, where were the gaps? Who got those kinds of notifications?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is an argument for keeping your landline.
Well, it would have to be, I think, a rotary
If I
phone.
may.
It would have to be one with a cord, because a cordless phone, which most of us have, runs on electricity.
Yep.
So if your power's out, even the landline's not going to take the call. My parents never got it. They had a landline, but never got the alert.
Well, and the as I understand it, the major trunk line that supports Charter Spectrum Communications burned up or overheated or something. So that's the whole other area that we're dependent upon, is that internet connections. And for days, you weren't able to, just like you said, you couldn't download something on your phone if you were trying to find a number, if you were trying to gain information. So it really, I mean, it's a good lesson to all of us about what, you know, the devices and the communication means that we have accessible in our own homes and businesses. We get a lot of pressure from the landline companies, or there is a lot of pressure from some landline companies to deregulate their requirement to serve what is called the carrier of last resort. That is, every Oregonian at this point is obligated to be served by some landline provider. They would like to walk away from that. And yet we have an experience like this, or certainly even COVID, and you can see how dependent we are on the limited communications that we have. So I think the circumstances are not making a very good case for deregulation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Your thoughts on that? Anybody have suggestions?
Well, I will add one thing to it, which is that the repeaters that serve the cell phones obviously are really important to this whole thing, because if you just have the landline and somebody's away from the house, they're not going to find out that they got to go home right now to evacuate an elderly relative or their pets or whatever. But the cell phones are served by towers. Our area over here is served by $8 Mountain. There's a big antenna on top of $8 Mountain. If that burns up, or something happens so that the tower goes down, then there's no cell phone service. So we have to look harder as a whole region and society on how we have redundancy in communications, so that, for instance, the ham radio people that fan out in all, or that live in all the different communities. I'm a ham radio person. You know, we have the capacity to talk even when those other systems are down. Well, we need to take advantage of that and leverage it to look at how do we make multiple lines of communication happen in case one of our systems breaks down or a line gets burnt up.
Mary.
I think Hugh has something to say.
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly to that. You know, I was not in the line of fire, but I did get an emergency alert that there was a fire in the area. And I got at least 3 alerts from RCC that we were closing the next day because I've signed up for email and text and a phone call. And so I got all 3 of those from RCC. So there's a model that was working, right? They send it to all 3 places. And it's just a matter of boom, send it. You know, type the message and it sends out to everybody. That's, you know, we need to have it be, you know, all of those things together.
Did you have something to add to that?
Hugh?
Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. The Tubbs fire, as I mentioned earlier in Santa Rosa, the cell phones actually, you know, I guess their post-incident recap, if you will, identified, as Jerry pointed out, identified the need for redundancies. And people get their information in different ways. One of the things that really went wrong for them on that one in Santa Rosa was just that the alerts that were supposedly going to be pushed through cell phones, the towers were actually the first things to go. And that actually kind of took them out at the knees for where, and not only that, but they realized that people have their phones on chargers, sometimes in other rooms. So at 3 a.m., that makes it kind of difficult to get the alerts necessary. So it's going to be, what they learned out of that is it's a multi-level approach that you need for notification. And right down to, as you mentioned, door knocking. I think Alberto pointed that out earlier. And so it's a host of items that needs to be feathered in. The Sun River, the community that I managed, we actually put in, believe it or not, we have tsunami warning sirens. And you'd think, why would Sun River need tsunami warnings? Well, we use them for the fires. So we use them for evacuation. If you hear this, you go here. You get this information, and it's going to blare. Now, granted, you're dealing with a smaller region, you know, a smaller community, but it can be done, and you need to be thinking on multiple levels. And I think when these fires, I should say, not just this fire, actually come to a close, you're going to have a lot of that information available to you. There's going to be a lot of work on the post-incident reporting that'll come out of it. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you're right. And several of the people in the chat had mentioned sirens. I remember when we first moved to Talent 50 years ago, it was an all volunteer fire department. And then if you ever heard the sirens go off there at the little fire department, everybody, I was at a city council meeting covering it as a reporter once, and everybody in the whole room jumped up and ran to fight the fire. But we all knew when we heard that siren go off, there's a fire in town, and you know, everybody ran to fight it. And so we have that, you know, ability to use a lot of different levels, I mean, of alerts, I think. One more thing I wanted to ask, part of the problem is that, you know, none of us had power, and that was really hard to get information, and it's hard to survive. I'm just going to tell you that for the last 7 days, figuring out how to get power to your house, and it's been a real challenge for me. I think it's back tonight. But someone asked why we don't put power lines underground to possibly prevent this from happening. Is that out of the question completely as we go and start restructuring our electrical system? Anybody?
It's expensive. Power companies don't like to do it. It can certainly be done, and in many instances it would be better. it would be prohibitive in places like Fontaine talked about, where we're tucking more and more houses into the resource lands where they really don't belong. And we have granted so many exceptions in Jackson County. I remember, gosh, it's almost 32 years ago, before the Jackson County Commission, ODF coming and giving a talk about how we needed, or pardon me, it was Fish and Wildlife. We needed to preserve wildlife corridors between the Siskiyous and the Cascades. And please don't poke any more houses in there. And I remember looking at that map again shortly before I left the Mail Tribune, which was already 20 years ago. And it looked like the county had taken a salt shaker and sprinkled houses all through our resource lands. And what happens is that when firefighters come, they have to privilege protecting those houses. They can't strategically think about how do we create a front against this fire that will protect the forest or the farms. And Oregon is changing. Oregon looks different this week. It's going to look far different in 10 years, and it's going to be unrecognizable to us in 20 years if we do everything we can to slow down climate change. It will still look unrecognizable to those of us who grew up here. It is uncanny how much change has happened. Since I was in high school, 29% of America's birds have disappeared. 29%, that's almost a third. That's a lot. We are marching across our wildlands and we're having so much negative impacts on our farmlands. We just have to think smart. And I want to push back against the idea that it's demonizing the opposition to call them out on the facts. It is demonizing the opposition to suggest that they're evil, or that they're stupid, or to insult them or call them long strands of names that our president has at his disposal. But it is not demonizing to say that the Democratic majority in both houses of Oregon bent over backwards to solicit cooperation on climate change. And each time that they offered concessions and deals were struck, deals were agreed to, the Republicans reneged and walked out. So that's what we're dealing with. And the only way we're going to save this state, the only way, is if we get one more House representative and one more Oregon senator, because we do not have a honest, reliable partner in this dialogue. We do not have someone that one can trust to honor their word. They have not. If we continue down this road with people like my opponent, who's taken thousands of dollars from the Pembina pipeline folks, from Koch Industries, from Chevron, from all these climate deniers who, in fact, the oil industry moved their offshore platforms tens of feet higher already in the 70s because they knew this was coming. They knew. And in fact, they have known since the 50s, and that's when the Pentagon first started saying to the electeds, we've got to do something about this. We've got to prepare for this. This is real. This is going to happen. And what happened in the 70s was that we got a Republican president who stripped the solar panels off the White House. And we still had plenty of time to act then. We didn't act. It's been a long time since the 70s. My hair was all black. I was skinny. I was young. I was super fit. I'm none of those things now. We've wasted a lot of time, and we've got to get going. This is an existential threat.
Yeah.
So don't tell me about demonizing the opposition. Thank you.
Jerry.
I second what you just said, Alberto, and I want to mention that one of the bills that was left lying on the cutting room floor when the last walkout happened was about dealing with fire and improving our forest management practices. And we absolutely have to do that. You know, there's a way in which you could say, you know, you could come to blows in our legislature and in our communities over the issue of the great need for affordable housing versus the need to not build out into the forest lands. And, you know, Oregon ranks 46th or 47th in amount of affordable housing. Grants Pass is the #3 town in the United States of America in the least affordable housing, #3. So Oregon has a big problem, and as we all know, it just got worse in some of our communities right here in this district. So we're going to face enormous pressure to build housing. Yes, we need to build it, but it's got to be urban infill. It's got to be in the towns. It's got to be additional dwelling units. It's got to be all multifamily. We've going to have to do what we can do to simultaneously address housing and the climate and make sure that we are not going to make things worse and set us up for the next fire disaster, because we're halfway there. So I think that gets back to what several people have said, which is we have to try to, as hard as we can, to build a climate of trust and kindliness. We don't need to demonize anybody, but we can call out bad behavior. And we can say, look, I'm setting a boundary here. This is crucial. We got to protect our communities, and enough is enough. We've got to work together and figure out the hard answers to how do we build housing and at the same time protect our communities from fire? How do we do good environmental work to protect the forests and at the same time do cool weather fuel reduction so that we reduce the amount of tinder and fodder for fires fodder is the wrong word, but you know, how we reduce the danger of fire in the right environmental ways.
But my point is that we have a complete stalemate at the moment. We have a stalemate with people who to this day deny climate change. We have a stalemate with people who to this day deny the viciousness of COVID and insist on going maskless. Or as my opponent did, emailed their constituents doubting Fauci's recommendation on masking, who pressurize the schools when the schools have their hands full trying to feed the people and prepare for teaching online, pressurize them to, by God, open up those contact sports so that our kids can safely engage in football. There's no way to do it. billion-dollar teams weren't able to protect their workers. And what we're seeing is it's not just like the flu, it sets you up for death. I mean, if you survive this thing, your heart is damaged, your lung is damaged, this is nothing you'd want for any young person who hopes to be an athlete. They need to put the athletics on pause. And thank God for Kate Brown, who in fact is being demonized and has taken wise, courageous steps to protect us. And there is no way we're going to break this stalemate until we get one more House representative, one more Oregon State Senator. Oh, 2? Is it 2?
Yeah.
Okay, 2.
So we have to get everybody up here in this top half of the screen elected, okay? This is crucial. And since we're dealing with COVID and we're all doing our campaigns online, I'm gonna just really strongly recommend to everyone that when you see a post by one of us, please like it, share it, put it out there, email your friends that live in these districts and in these communities. It is really a challenge for us to get our messages out, and we can't go door to door. I mean, I had every intention of knocking on thousands of doors this summer. I'm not going to knock on any. So at this point, it's real challenge to get out to talk to people, and we're going to be depending all of you out there to help us get that message out there and to make sure that what we believe in and the importance of what we've been talking about tonight gets out to all of your friends. In the retail world, they say that if you tell 7 people, then those 7 people tell 7 more, and one thing that you say is going to end up with 50 people. So think of it that way. You may think of a small thing by just sending out an email to your friends and saying, hey, I was on a call tonight with these people, and they were really concerned about climate change, and they're really concerned about the wildfire and how this, you know, how we do this going forward. And just by sending a simple email out to your friends, you may turn a few votes that are going to help Alberto and Mary and Jerry and Hugh and Barbara and I get elected. So I'll just kind of put that out there. Make sure that you're participating, make sure your friends are participating. And if you know anyone in the zones that lost their houses, and the numbers of people on my list are growing every day, you need to make sure they're going to get their ballot. That's something we're all going to have to pay attention to, because they can certainly register to vote again, so to speak, by giving a new address. But we have to make sure that those people who are really so encompassed with trying to find shelter tonight also vote for the sake of all of Oregon and for the sake of all of us.
Hugh had something to say as well.
I want to go back to what Alberto and Jerry were talking about as far as affordable housing. I 2 terms on the Deschutes County Planning Commission. I chaired it actually through the Marijuana Fund, which was a joy. But when we talk about affordable housing and we talk about Senate Bill 100, going back to Tom McCall, and our true land use, the Constitution, if you will, for our land use for the state of Oregon, and how we put that into play. I think it can be done. I listen to developers and folks in Deschutes County in particular with frustration. The east side has a huge frustration as to how land use is applied to them, and trying to tackle, for instance, a fast-growing county like Deschutes, and how they would handle affordable housing. And what I've seen over time is, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And I think in a lot of cases, we don't do enough planning in future visioning. And I say that coming from the Planning Commission, because I used to point that out to my colleagues on the commission. I thought we were the Planning Commission, not the Reaction Commission. And I look at this, and here's where I'm going with this. I think that we need to take our rural counties in particular. They're strapped, we know they are, they're on resources and staffing, perhaps even on expertise when it comes to urban reserve planning and even urban growth boundary needs. So what I would like to do is actually specialize and look at getting our rural counties set for success, as opposed to being knee-jerk reactionary when they're already pressed against the wall. And I think it can be done over time. For instance, you could take the next decade and actually put this as a goal for at a minimum, to put together urban reserve planning of let's say two of the most populated areas within that county, and for starters, and work with the LCD and LCDC to actually bring in assistance for these rural counties, so that when they do planning, it's more than just housing. It's all the other pieces webbed together. So it's all your infrastructure. It's where schools get laid out. It's the carrying capacity of the land itself that has to be considered as well. And I think that it's not as simple as just, here's where the housing goes. It's all those other pieces. And if you don't plan for it well, you end up fixing nothing but mistakes over the course of 10, 20, 30 years. Just stubbing your toe over and over. So I look at this being more forward thinking that we should really put an emphasis on our rural counties for urban reserve and urban growth boundary planning. All right, and if we did that, it would be done in a way that's consistent with Senate Bill 100 and Tom McCall's initial vision. And we wouldn't be banging our heads against the wall and trying to do this. And to Alberto's question, and I've seen it in Deschutes County, this sagebrush subdivision world of these sprinkled homes that are now actually in wildfire danger. So you end up with disjointed planning, and it really doesn't work. So if we're to do this right, we need to provide rural counties the tools in which to do this. And I think it can be done. It's not a heavy lift because you're not asking for something to be done immediately. I think it can be done over time. And if we set a goal of the next decade in which for these rural counties to actually have at a minimum urban reserve planning in place, you're going to see more structured development that would dovetail into the existing community that's there, as opposed to something that is kind of cobbed in and on. One last point to that. Redmond, Oregon did an urban reserve, and they set aside land, did the planning well in advance, and were poised when it came time to do their urban growth boundary. Urban growth boundaries, as you probably all know, are knock down, drag out, they're messy, but they don't have to be. They can be fairly orderly if it's well thought through from the get-go. And I just share that with you. For affordable housing, I see this as a key component where we don't mar the rural counties, but we actually set them up for growth and success in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
I really like what Hugh's been saying. I want to add a few little points. One is that by doing what Hugh just said, we can also set ourselves up for success with transit, because we need to not duplicate endless suburbia where everybody has to drive their car to get out of the food desert, to get out of wherever they might be. We have to work on that too, because it's part of our climate work. We absolutely must do it. A couple of other key things. One is that poverty is a huge issue here in rural Oregon. And one of the things that we can do that we have not really done enough yet is urge our whole population to relocalize where we shop and where we save our money. Put it in local credit unions and locally owned banks, and to not buy in big box stores if at all possible, but instead buy in local franchises, locally owned businesses, because that money can cycle 7 times around in the community. That's what the research says. It cycles 7 times if you buy locally before that money bleeds out to Wall Street and then never comes back. So we can resuscitate and revitalize our local industry and build jobs for local people by doing that. It's a heavy lift. It's hard to get people out of the habit of just buying from Amazon or just going to Home Depot or whatever, but I think we can do that. And then the other one, the last one I want to mention is a state bank. In California, they have now a law that allows a state bank, and they're building those. The only state in the United States that's had one for a long time is North Dakota. When they had a really, really bad flood up there, they got in touch a few years back. They got in touch with FEMA, and FEMA said, yeah, we aim to help you. It'll be about 3 weeks. And people were like, oh my God, you know. And they walked across the street to the North Dakota State Bank, and they said, well, yes, we can help. We can have it ready in an hour. They started cutting checks in 1 hour, and they began rebuilding that same afternoon. So that's an example. I'm not trying to knock FEMA. FEMA's, you know, they're hard pressed. They're doing what they're going to do. But we need a state bank in Oregon that can partner with all the little banks and credit unions and can make funding available for natural disasters and other kinds of things very, very quickly.
Thank you, Gary. We're down to the last 10 minutes, so I'd just like to ask first of all, thank all of you for being here and giving us this time and your expertise. I've learned a lot, taken a lot of notes tonight. So I'd just like to ask each candidate, please just give us a final thought before we go out tonight. I'll go backwards. Barbara, any perspectives that you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
I want to thank you all for running. You're all amazing. Just one note, our son works for the Bureau of Land Management in fire, and his assignment this week is in Clackamas County, working with firefighters who've been on the line and helping them with what they're finding and what is happening to them each day on these situations. And like, this is a new job, dealing with the trauma. So my heart goes out to all of you that are living with it and your losses, and we'll get through it. Thank you.
All right, Mary.
Thanks, Terry. And thank you everybody for being here and for the invite to be here. I will echo again what Barbara said. This is a phenomenal panel of progressive candidates that we have to vote for in Southern Oregon. And it has not always been that way, right? There's oftentimes been just blank spaces on the ballot. And so I'm honored to be among you, and I do ask for your vote. They said we need 2 Senate people and 1 representative. Well, I think that we need to re-elect Pam. We need to get me, Alberto, and Barbara into there as well. And we need to send Jerry and Hugh to the Senate. And then have Terrie be our county commissioner in Jackson County. And then, let's see what we can do. I think this is a powerful team, and I would be honored to be among it. So thank you.
All right, Mary. How about you, Hugh? You're muted. You're gonna have to try one more time.
Here we go.
There you go.
I don't have a label to put on my can, so I'm going to hold this up like this for Pam on this. In all seriousness, this is an awesome panel, and the best part about it is we're trying to solve problems, and we're trying to solve them. If we can all steer clear of a lot of finger pointing, I think we can get a lot done. If your mind's closed, you're not learning. Just keep that in mind. There's a lot of passion here because we really all do care about Oregon. So I wish all of you the best of luck. I hope you all stay very well along the way. And someday we're all going to meet in person. So thank you for enjoying. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you. Sorry for your loss too.
Thanks. And Jerry, you're muted again.
And now can you hear me? Yes.
Here you
Okay. So I'm grateful to be here with each of you, and I'm proud to be a part of this team together. Some people say, like, alone we're not so powerful. Together we're very powerful, and we can ally with the people who want to make Oregon better. We can ally together. I want to ask all of the people who are listening and watching this, who are watching the candidates, there's something you can do. Terrie mentioned a bit of it. You can write letters to the editor of your local paper and talk about your candidate and why you want to see them elected, what a difference it will make for you personally. And they may print those. They're not going to print it from me, a candidate, but they'll print it from a voter. So you can do that. You can write testimonials and send them to your candidate so they can put them on their website. I think that we need to emphasize that we are in this together, and you can help us do that. And then we're going to help you by by being the best, honest, transparent legislators that you could hope for.
Alberto.
I want to toss out another idea. Mixed use, mixed income, subsidized condo towers. And you might say, why are you so crazy about condos? I'm not crazy. Condos are the most efficient housing that we could put up. You could make a condo that would provide all its own electricity on site. And if it's mixed use, you cut down on transportation, you cut down on infrastructure. As representative, I would represent a city at 85,000 that doesn't have a building over 5 stories high. Does that make sense? Well, we're spreading out onto farmland. Our valley, you know, our bottom land here is some of the richest land in the valley. So doesn't make sense, no. So mixed use, mixed income, subsidized condo towers. And why specifically a condo and not a rental? Because for too long, we've put the money to the people who have it. And you want everybody in that building to have a stake. You want them to get off the rental treadmill and just dog paddle through life and start building up a stake, having a little bit of equity that they can pass on. So mixed use, mixed income, condo towers. Thank
I'll
you.
remember that. And Pam.
You're muted too.
Right. Well, let me first say how honored I am to represent Southern Jackson County in the legislature. It's been an incredible 4 years, and I look forward to doing it for at least a couple more. Thanks to your support. But I also want to say I am tired of being the only House member for hundreds of miles around. If you look at the map, there's a little blue rectangle down above the California border. And then there's nobody for counties and counties. I would be so proud to have the lineup of House reps and senators who are on this call, Senate candidates who are on this call, commuting with me, whether we are in the same car or in these COVID times following each other up the freeway, because it is time for Jackson County and Southern Oregon to have much more representation in my caucus and in Senator Jeff Golden's caucus. You guys are an incredible bunch. I think the times that we are in show us even more why government is important, why we need good internet systems to help people communicate, why we need health care that will allow people to go in and be cared for without breaking the bank, why we need education systems to care for our kids and to grow our workers and to support our economies. This is the work of government, and I'm running because I see the power in the potential for government at all levels, at the local level, at the county level, Terry, and at the state level, to really change people's lives. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your support.
I would like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, for being here, or for watching it on the recording, because I believe Hillary is recording this for the rest of history. So we're hoping that when this comes out, you'll share it with your friends so that they can also learn about these wonderful candidates and their amazing ideas. I think this has been a wonderful evening. And as we say on behalf of ORD2 Indivisible, thank you all for all that you do. And we know that everyone here is committed and that they are part of this same team of people that want Oregon to be better and Southern Oregon to be better represented. So with that, I'll say goodnight to everyone tonight. Please contact us in any way, find us on Facebook, send us emails. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm just delighted to, I'm looking forward to working with all of you next year when we're elected. How about that? All right. All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.